Hey guys, so recently I had an idea a couple months back that even though I have literally hundreds of unread books everywhere in my room and even outside my room, and even though I'm still currently buying books that I need to read, I really thought it would be fun to go back to some books that I had kind of not grown up with, but I think especially ones that had come out during that kind of golden age renaissance, if you will, of YA, like the 2012, 2014 kind of time period where there was just so much coming out and a lot of series that were just so special, but I feel like don't always get talked about a lot nowadays just because of how many there were, right? Like Hunger Games or Twilight, I feel like sometimes it's easier to forget about them. And I'm also curious to look at them outside of that kind of time period where you were reading so much like that, like those trilogies, the sci-fi, the dystopian one, to see how they hold up years later, you know? So I wanted to start originally with To All the Boys I Loved Before, and my actual thinking was that I wanted to do like a To All the Boys I Loved Before versus The Summer I Turned Pretty reading, because while I have read To All the Boys I Loved Before, I never finished that trilogy, and I also have never read any of The Summer I Turned Pretty, so I thought it would just be interesting to kind of see the difference, especially since those are both so, I feel, popular and had such an important impact on the kind of media of getting turned into movies and TV shows. I feel like was really important. So I wanted to look at that originally, but then I just decided, you know what, forget that. I'll just look at To All the Boys I Loved Before, since like I said, I did first read it when it came out, and it is kind of outside that like 2014 period, but we're going a little bit outside of it. That's just kind of the original state I had in my mind. But it came out a little bit after that, I think. It was actually longer ago than I realized, which is kind of crazy because that means the movie is also longer ago than I realized. But yeah, I read it when it first came out. I really remember not liking it. Like, I just think it didn't connect for me. I've never been like a huge, especially back then, I was definitely more of a like dystopian sci-fi. Like, I liked kind of the action-y stuff. I wasn't so much a contemporary person. So I feel like it just wasn't connecting with me. And then I do remember trying to reread it, I think when the movie came out, because I really, really enjoyed the movie, and I was like, oh, maybe like, you know how sometimes you just read a book and it's not the right time, you know, you're not just connecting with it for some reason, but then you read it again later and you're like, oh, this actually is not bad, or I really love it. So I remember trying to reread it, I think around the time the movie came out. It must have been after I watched it, and I still was just not loving it. I was like, so I just put it down and then never picked it back up. So I decided to pick it back up. And I think, I don't know right now if I'm going to read the whole trilogy, because I feel like I really just like the aspect of Laura Jean and Peter Kavinsky, right? Like, I don't want to see like the love triangles and all that because I've never liked love triangles. But I do have to say that reading it, the interesting thing is sometimes like I'll read a book that I haven't read in a while and like I actually remember like, oh, like, you know, maybe not exactly what happens, but it has that familiarity, that like deja vu of like, oh, I've read this before. I wasn't getting that with this one, so that makes it very interesting to me because I definitely know I read it, and that's just why I'm confused about why nothing really seems to be sticking out. But maybe that's just because I really didn't like it, so I didn't really pay as much attention to it. So I'm about 100 pages in right now, and I do have to say the first 40 or so pages were rough for me. I'm not gonna lie. I think I can see why when I did my second reread all the way back then, I didn't continue with it. I think a lot of it are the issues that I'm seeing of why I probably didn't like it in the first place, and also why I didn't continue it on my second reread, which is I feel like the writing and Laura Jean's character in particular are very young for a 17-year-old, but I also feel like just the dialogue felt a little clunky and stuff like that, and it just didn't read as like natural to me. Like, I didn't feel like I was like reading like what I thought a 17-year-old girl would sound like. And especially I feel like back then when I was around that age reading it for the first time, that was probably why I was so turned off by it, because I was just like, this does not have any connection to life at all with me. Like, I just don't see this. Like, it's just no. Especially like with the family dialogue, I feel like there's just too much where it's like, yeah, technically you would say this, but it doesn't read well. Like, it's just like them being like, oh, what do you want for ice cream? Oh, I'll have strawberry. Like, it's just like, yeah, you would say that, but it just doesn't flow well in an actual book. So the first 40 pages, I was like, yeah, I can see why I didn't like this. And then our man, Peter Kavinsky, gets dropped in, and the whole thing with like the fake dating starts, and I'm loving it now. I think they seem way more authentic, and I think Peter Kavinsky is definitely more of a like convincing character. Like, you know a Peter Kavinsky at your school. What's interesting is I thought so much of what people gravitated towards, and it definitely was, but so much of what people gravitated towards with the movie liking it was the fact that Noah Centineo was Peter Kavinsky, right? Because he was just iconic in that role, so charming, like the pocket spin, all the stuff he did was so amazing. And it's great to see that like that is kind of Peter Kavinsky. Like, they picked a great actor, obviously, who understood and is also very charismatic, but it's interesting to see that like Peter himself is very like adorable and charming and just kind of like amused by Laura Jean. The first moment that actually made me laugh was when she told Josh that she was dating Peter, and he was like, oh, I'm just surprised. Peter usually goes for like girls like Jen. And she's like, oh, I'm so unattractive compared to Jen. And he's like, no, no, no. Like, you stay at home. You don't really go out or whatever. Like, trying to backtrack, you know. Josh, I do have to say, Josh does not like in a good light in this. And I kind of appreciate that. I thought they kind of just made it for the movie. But when they call him a Bon Iver wannabe in the movie, like, you're like, you know what? You actually are. That is your character. But she says something about like, I'm leaving now. I guess Peter is fine with being with a homely girl. And he's like, I didn't call you homely. And it's just so funny to me because I feel like for so much of it she's just like overthinking what she wants to say to Josh and just like trying to be as nice as she can. So then like when he actually makes her mad and she's just like, oh, I'm so homely, I'm like, yes, like fight back with him. And I feel like their whole relationship, like when they talk so far, and like I said, I'm only at the part where they've agreed to fake date to like get Jen off his back and then to convince Josh that she's like actually dating him. That part is just like their chemistry is just so good. Like in the books, like I feel like their dialogue works better and it feels more natural and free flowing and not so like stilted and overthinky. But I'm really enjoying it. Like total 180 from the first like 40 pages for me, and I'm just so excited to hopefully see them continue with this and also definitely see them interact more. But I'm excited now. I'm excited in a way that I wasn't before, so that's exciting.
Okay, here's the other thing. I feel like I didn't complain about Josh enough because he annoys me so bad. It's like deep inside me how much he annoys me. So I decided what I'm gonna do is set a timer for 1 minute and just get all my frustration out about Josh so far. This isn't saying that I won't complain about him again because he's very annoying. All right, 1 minute. Let's go. Ready? Here's the thing about Josh. I just feel like he's so annoying. Like I said, I feel like he is such like an emotional baggage for Laura Jean. Like he clearly uses her as like a crutch to just like support what's going through with Margot and like breaking up with her. When he got the letter from her, I was so pissed how he was just like, what does this, like how he was so shocked that there's ever a world where like she could be attracted to him and just seemed like, if I had known this like just awful. And then everything with Peter is annoying me too, how he's just like, Peter wouldn't like you, like he just doesn't like Peter, and he finds it like so crazy that not only would she date Peter but that she would date in general. And it just feels very much like when a guy has ownership of a girl like as a friend and is like, wait, but I need you, like now you're not seeing me and now you're all into Peter, and it's just so freaking annoying. And I feel like he's just like, he just feels like a leech, like he's just using her. I feel like now that Margot's not around, because yeah, she hung out with him when he was with Margot and stuff, but like it's very clear that like he just like wants what he wants from her, and then like he never asks her about herself or how her day's going, and it's just like so freaking frustrating.
So we're finally getting to the territory where I feel like Laura Jean is starting to realize that she's falling for Peter, but also that clearly Peter has fallen for her and she doesn't realize it yet, which I think is so cute and sweet. Like he's so jealous of whenever she hangs out with Josh and stuff like that, and I think she wipes it away as like, oh, he just doesn't like Josh, but like it's very clearly that like he likes having her around and like he's still worried that like she's gonna get with Josh or something like that. I love Peter so much. Again, I think I like him more in the movie. I definitely think he's more kind in the movies, if that makes sense. Like they smoothed out some of his rougher edges, but there's a part where he drops her off at her house and she forgets her keys in his car, so he comes back to bring them to her and he's like, is he still out here, like referring to Josh because she had gone to Josh to get her spare set of keys, and she's like, oh, probably he was out here like a minute ago, and he full on like leans out the window and kisses her and is like, just in case he's watching. And I'm like, Peter, like it's so like, it's just so clearly that he is like jealous and like wants to be with her, and like the ski trip is coming up and he's like begging her to go on the ski trip. And I feel like what I also really like is you see that like Peter understands her very well. I feel like even in a way better than Josh and kind of even Margot, because Margot is pissing me off, let me tell you. Margot, so they finally got a hold of Margot. She finally decided she actually wants to talk to them. Literally everything that Laura Jean is saying she's doing, Margot's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Like, she wants to go on the ski trip, and Margot's like, you hate skiing, you're not gonna go skiing. Whereas, like, Peter, like, she was like, I don't like skiing, I don't like snowboarding. He's like, oh, I thought of that, but, like, there's a really nice fireplace, like, you can just curl up and read forever, I'll bring you hot chocolate. Like, he just gets her, and it's so irritating when Margot and Josh are just so, like, pissy about everything she wants to do and are just like completely trying to put their own agenda on her. Like, Josh was like, oh, are you trying out for the play? And she's like, why would I try out for the play? You know, like, I hate public speaking. And he's like, oh, I think you should. And then Margot's like, oh, I think you should do this. If they wanted her to do stuff and then she's like, okay, I'm not gonna do what you want, but like, I'll do this. And they were like, great, we just wanted you to get out and do stuff. That'd be one thing. But it's the fact that like when she does suggest something, they're like, that's not what we meant. That's like annoying the crap out of me. And I also feel like the difference that I'm seeing with like when Peter talks about Josh and when Josh talks about Peter is that like Peter will only bring Josh up and like his disdain for Josh, which first of all, I mean, he's right that Josh sucks. So like whenever he complains about Josh, I'm like, bring it on. Come on, I'm right there with you. But I feel like he only like rolls his eyes or like gets irritated by him when he's brought up by LJ, you know? It's not like he just like organically talks about him because he doesn't give a crap about Josh when he's not like there, you know? Like he's just focused on her, whereas Josh is like always bringing up Peter. There was like a scene at the diner where they were hanging out for the first time in a while, and like he's like, so how are things going with Kavinsky? And then she like got distracted by something and she's like, oh, I didn't really want to answer that question anyways, like I'm glad. And then it's like they order their food and he's immediately like, so as I was saying, how are things going with Kavinsky? And it's just like so intense the way he's talking about her, like she's like some baby bird of like, she's like, you're not like other girls, he's a player, like you can't handle him. And it's like, first of all, and she pointed this out, she's like, how is he a player? He's been with this same girl for like 4 years, like he's not just like sleeping around. And second of all, you don't know him, and it's just like everyone's acting like she's so stupid for like being around him and like can't actually make her own decisions. And I like seeing her get frustrated with Josh because I feel like there's like an idolization of him almost where like he can do no wrong. So I like that like once she's realizing like, why can't you like acknowledge that like I can make my own decisions and like I think Peter's a good person and why can't you respect that? She's also kind of seeing how like they're all warped together in his mind because it's like he invited her to go to like a 9-hour Lord of the Rings thing and she was like, oh, Peter probably wants to do something this weekend with me, you know, my boyfriend. And he's like, oh, that's fine, I'll just take Kitty. And she's kind of like, are we just interchangeable in his mind? Whereas I feel like you see with Peter and Kitty and Peter and LJ, they have two vastly different relationships, right? Like he's just completely entertained by both of them. It's strange, you know? Like, I feel like Peter wouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna take her then instead. I feel like he'd be like, oh, maybe I'll see if Kitty wants to, like, do something that Kitty likes, not take her to a Lord of the Rings movie because, like, she just wants to spend time with Josh. So, yeah. Like I said, though, the ski trip is coming up, so we all know how that's gonna go. So I'm excited to see what's gonna happen. So I finally finished it. It took longer than I was anticipating just because I have to say for like the last 70 pages, it was hard to get through. It was like a lot of what I didn't like about the beginning with like Josh and Margot, everyone basically but Laura Jean, Peter, or Kitty just being there and annoying me. Like I find Josh super annoying and like he confronted her about like the letter and basically was like, you've had this feelings for this whole time and like I just figured out that you liked me and you just expected me to like push those feelings down, blah blah blah, but like basically just trying to manipulate and guilt her into feeling bad. And then he kisses her even though he knows she's dating Peter, so that's a giant red flag for me. And just all the like revisionist history of him being like, I always liked you but I never thought you had a chance, and she's like, stuff it. And I like actually liked when she stood up to him. I was like, thankfully she finally did it. This is what I've been waiting for like all book long, is for her to be like, you know what, Josh, take it where the sun don't shine, okay? Because he just completely like used her and never thought of her that way, and then he got this letter. Then Margot comes home for the winter break or whatever, and it's just completely unsufferable. Like the minute she gets off the plane, she's like, oh, you guys did this while I was gone, you guys did this while I was gone, like trying to change everything and just being like, I'm still surprised you're going skiing, and like so mean to Peter. Like just everything she brings up about Peter, she's like, I still can't believe you're dating Peter. And it's like, come off it, Margot, okay? Like no one wants you here. Like they do want you here, but I don't, okay? That was just annoying. And then like everything that happens with like Peter towards the end, like I hate, like this happens in TV shows so much, but this happened in this, where it's like the couple is actually only like together for like
a heartbeat, and then they're broken up again, and that's what happened. Because what happens basically on the ski trip happens, except this time I don't think there's a video. I think there's a video in the movie, right? But like there's not. So people are saying like they hooked up in the hot tub, and this is like devastating. Like Margot's like, how could you do this, when it's like Margot actually hooked up with Josh? So like there's a whole thing with that where I'm like, I think you should be more upset with Margot than Margot's upset with you. But yeah, they basically fight over that, but then like she doesn't even really talk to him about the problems, and it's like he tries to talk to her and she's like, it's just over, and it's very immature and annoying, especially for, I feel like her character growth was supposed to be about maturing and realizing like, you know, that you can want love that's not like the fantasy idea and like it's scary, but putting yourself out there and like doing the work is worth it. So I felt like that was just a huge step backwards for her to now be like, oh my gosh, like I'm not talking to him, whatever. The only thing I did like was Chris, who has kind of just been annoying this whole time, actually stepped up and like protected LJ and was like, she doesn't want to talk to you, like I'm sitting with her on the bus. I liked that, but just the way she like ran away from Peter essentially was annoying and just felt very childish, which was what my problem was with the beginning of the book. And I get that like she's 17, but at the same time I feel like there's a difference, and I feel like we also could have had character growth with her that way. So the book ends with her not even really making up with Peter. She like decides that she's gonna make up with him, but she doesn't really, and I just hate that there's like no reunion scene. I hate when books end on like cliffhangers like that, and I understand that there's more in the series, but like I don't plan on reading them, so like just to end it like that is super frustrating. And I feel like the movie honestly did a better job at the story. Like I feel like there's very rare times where I like the movies better than the books, but in this case I do think the movie is better than the book. It gives it kind of a clear ending while still leaving potential open for other sequels, but at least wraps up like the story you've been getting in this one, which I think is more satisfying as a reader and a viewer to like at least wrap that up before introducing all this other stuff. So I think like that was just frustrating. Kitty was the biggest surprise for me because like I love her in the movie and the TV show obviously, but in the books like she just was like so little and so annoying that like I didn't really like her. But then come towards the end, she's literally like the most level-headed and like mature of all of them. Like she's like, why aren't you with Peter? Like you like Peter, Peter likes you. Just talk this out and stop like running away from things. And I just think it's so funny. I was like, Kitty, you are MVP of this book, honestly. It's frustrating because, like I said, I didn't like the beginning. I was like, oh, this is probably like 2 stars. And then once everything started with Peter and her, and I felt like it was more realistic, it definitely rocketed up to like 4 stars for me. But then the last 70 pages of all that just like backside of character development, characters that I didn't like having more of like a pronounced role on the page and stuff like that, just bumped it down, I think, to 3 stars. It was for a little bit better than I remembered, but I also see where I was probably initially frustrated back when I first read it, and I definitely think that there was a lot to expand upon, and I do think the movie is better. So I'm gonna go watch the movie. I just think it's not my cup of tea just because I would have liked, again, a more solid ending, better character growth. I feel like I think she made up with Margot way too quickly to then still be mad at Peter. I think she made up with Josh way too quickly to still then be mad at Peter. I don't know. It just felt like the reaction to certain things was like she was judging more people harshly and not giving them as much slack, which I do think was Kitty's point of like, slow your roll, basically, which I appreciated. I get like planning sequels and stuff like that, but I also feel like you've got to write the book to write the book. Like it can't be like the payoff is in another book essentially without having any payoff in this, you know what I mean? So that's, I think, what was frustrating for me, was just like not having that resolution. And I think also in terms of like for Peter, it's like it just wasn't the greatest, them even getting together, right? Because like literally in the movie it's so cute, like my absolute favorite, where he's like saying, oh, I got like the yogurt all the way across town or whatever, what do you think that means? And she's like, that you really like yogurt? And he's like, oh my gosh, like he's just so frustrated, but it's so cute. In the books he's like, they're like walking and he's like, hey, you want to hear something funny? And she's like, yeah, what? And he's like, I kind of like you. And I'm like, okay, top 10 most romantic love confessions, nowhere to be found. Yeah, it's just not my cup of tea, but I am glad I reread it. So I think this was definitely an interesting experiment for sure. And I definitely want to check out some more books from around that time to see what my feelings are for them, if they hold up, if my feelings changed and stuff like that. So if you have suggestions or if you have thoughts on To All the Boys I Loved Before and like book, movie, whatever kind of thing with that, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys all so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!